Breakfast that morning felt ordinary enough, the golden light pouring through my Colorado Springs kitchen window, the familiar sound of my old refrigerator humming away, and me, Stanley Miller, settling in with the Sunday Gazette, black coffee, and the crossword. At my age, you cherish small routines, especially after a lifetime of change. But you can live 70 years and still get caught off guard by your own flesh and blood. My daughter, Jessica, appeared in the kitchen doorway, clutching a big yellow envelope like it was a winning lottery ticket. That smile of hers, wide, eager, but with a hint of something brittle underneath, always meant she wanted something. I knew that look well. Close behind her stood her husband, Tyler. He leaned back against the counter with all the confidence of a man who's never had to pay a mortgage on time. That was my kitchen, my house, but suddenly it felt like I was the guest. "What's this, Jess?" I asked, setting down my paper. "Dad, I have a surprise for you." Her voice was too cheerful, like she was trying to sell me a used car. She pushed the envelope across the table. "Just open it. It's important." I eyed Tyler. He didn't move, just nodded at the envelope. "We need you to look through this, Stan," he said, using my name like he was talking to an old business partner, not his wife's father. I opened the envelope. A stack of papers slid out onto my breakfast table, legal letterhead, credit card statements, a spreadsheet filled with numbers big enough to make my chest tighten. Names of banks, signatures, casino receipts, all with my name at the bottom. Atlantic City, Reno, and places I'd never even visited. The more I read, the more I felt the ground shifting beneath me. Jessica's face changed as she watched me piece it together. "We found these in your office last week," she said, her voice shaky now. "When we were helping you organize your bills, remember?" Tyler stepped forward. "You've got almost $500,000 in debt, Stan. This all needs to be paid, and the clock is ticking. They're coming for the house if you don't." I looked back at the papers, then at my daughter. "Jess, I've never gambled in my life. This isn't me. Someone's forged my name." Her expression flickered, regret, fear, maybe guilt. "But it is your name, Dad. You must have forgotten. Maybe you're not keeping up with everything lately." That's when I saw it, the way Tyler's lips curled just a bit, the glimmer of satisfaction. They were united, pressing in. I set my mug down, hands steady despite the shaking inside. "I'm not crazy. I didn't do this," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Tyler's voice went cold. "Well, somebody has to pay. We can't lose everything because of your mistakes." The next words came like a slap. "If you don't take responsibility," Jessica snapped, "we're out on the street. There won't be a home for any of us." I stared at the kitchen where I'd watched Jess grow up, took in the photos still hanging on the fridge, the smell of toast burning slightly in the toaster. Everything suddenly felt foreign. The signatures on those documents looked just like mine, but I knew the truth. And then, just as I stood to tell them both I was done with these games, Jessica's hand shot out. She grabbed the coffee pot, her voice trembling with anger. "You always said family comes first." "Well, prove it." Before I could react, the hot coffee was flying toward my chest. The pain was sharp and immediate, but it was nothing compared to what I felt inside, the shock of betrayal from the people I'd spent my whole life protecting. The boiling coffee hit me square across the chest and neck, soaking my shirt, the shock nearly knocking me back against the kitchen counter. Jessica's eyes went wide, as if she hadn't quite believed she'd actually done it. For a second, the whole world went silent except for my sharp intake of breath. The pain was real, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest as I realized what my daughter, my little Jess, had just become. Tyler stepped between us, not to help me, but to press his advantage. "Get out, Stan. Take your things and go. You're not wanted here until you sort out your mess." My kitchen. My house. Suddenly I was the intruder. Jessica was trembling, whether from guilt or rage I couldn't tell. I stared at the coffee dripping onto the linoleum, staining the floor I'd installed with my own hands 20 years ago. My first instinct was to defend myself, to shout that this was all some huge misunderstanding, but the look on Tyler's face told me that nothing I said would change their minds. The fix was in. I built this home, I said quietly, not trusting myself to say more. Not anymore, old man, Tyler sneered. You want a roof over your head, you pay your debts. We're not going down with you. I pressed past him and staggered toward my bedroom. My chest stung where the coffee had scalded me, but there was no time for first aid, not with both of them prowling the hallway behind me. I locked my bedroom door, took a few shaky breaths, and peeled off my shirt to check the damage. Angry red patches stared back at me from the mirror. I reached for a clean undershirt and tried to ignore the trembling in my hands. I threw a few clothes in my old suitcase, found my wallet, my phone, and, most importantly, the folder of important papers I kept stashed in my desk. Property deed, insurance info, birth certificate, savings account passbook, the old will I'd written after my wife died. Things they hadn't found, things I knew I'd need if this went legal. Out in the hall, I could hear Jessica sobbing, and Tyler muttering about calling the bank, the police, whoever would listen. I didn't wait to find out if they meant it. I slipped out the back door, the cool Colorado air hitting my burned chest like a splash of ice water. The neighbor's porch light was on. I crossed the fence and knocked, suitcase in hand. Stan? My old friend Walt said, opening the door, eyes wide with concern. What in the world happened to you? I stepped inside, the warmth and the smell of coffee hitting me like a wave of memory. Walt's kitchen looked just like it had for decades. Cubs memorabilia, an old wooden table, the faint scent of bacon grease and maple syrup. I collapsed into a chair and let the whole story pour out, from the moment Jessica and Tyler moved in. Just for a few weeks. To help after my hip surgery, to the way they'd slowly taken over my life, the bills, the chores, even my garage. Walt shook his head. They set you up, Stan. You know that, right? This is elder abuse, plain and simple. You have to call the cops. I gripped my mug, wincing as the burns flared up. She's my daughter, I said, voice cracking. It's hard to believe she'd do this. He leaned forward, his expression hardening. You can't let them ruin your life. Call 911. Report the fraud. You have witnesses, me, your other friends, even your doctor can testify you're not losing your mind. His words made sense, but it still felt like a betrayal, dialing the phone on my own child. But the memory of Jessica's face, cold, unrecognizing, pushed me forward. I picked up the phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. What's your emergency? I swallowed hard. I was assaulted in my home by my daughter. She threw boiling coffee at me. There's also fraud, forged debt papers, maybe identity theft. I'm safe now, at my neighbor's house, but they're still in my home. Within 15 minutes, the patrol car pulled up. 2 officers, one older, one young and eager, took my statement, photographed the burns on my chest, and jotted down everything I said. Walt vouched for me, adding details I'd left out. They promised to handle it, to check the debt papers, to get me to the hospital if my burns got worse. As the sun went down over the Rockies, I realized I was homeless for the first time in 70 years, all thanks to my own family. But something inside me was changing. I wasn't just a victim. I was going to fight back. I spent that night in Walt's spare bedroom, staring up at the popcorn ceiling, listening to the clock tick and the distant hum of traffic out on Utah Avenue. My chest throbbed where the coffee burns lingered, but it was the ache inside that kept me awake. I replayed every conversation I'd ever had with Jessica, searching for the moment when love and trust had turned into calculation and betrayal. At sunrise, Walt insisted on driving me to the urgent care clinic. The nurse clucked her tongue as she applied ointment, and wrapped my chest in cool gauze. "You're lucky, Mr. Miller," she said gently. "Superficial burns. But you need to take it easy for a while." If only she knew how hard that would be now. While I was being patched up, Walt stepped out to call his cousin, who worked for the county sheriff's department. By the time we left the clinic, the wheels of the law were already turning. "Stan," Walt said as we drove home, "I know you feel like you're betraying family, but you're not. You're protecting yourself, and that's something you should have done a long time ago." Back at his kitchen table, we made a plan. I would stay at Walt's place until things calmed down. He'd already dug out a stack of legal pads for notes and evidence. "Write down everything you remember," he said. "Times, dates, even little stuff. It all matters." I spent the next hour writing, my hand aching, but my mind getting sharper with every detail. It wasn't just the forged debt. Over the last 2 years, Jessica and Tyler had wormed their way into every part of my life. They'd helped me sort my mail and paid a few bills, but in the process, they'd changed passwords, redirected statements, and gradually isolated me from my friends at church and the old-timers poker group at the VFW. Tyler even convinced me to let him handle my online banking after I mixed up a payment once. Now I saw how they'd used my trust as a weapon. The police called just before noon. "Mr. Miller? This is Officer Daniels with Colorado Springs PD. We're at your residence now. Your daughter and son-in-law are here and cooperating." The officer's tone was steady but firm. "We've collected the debt documents and are securing the scene. Would you be able to come by and identify the forged paperwork?" Walt insisted on coming with me. My hands shook as we drove down Magnolia Lane, every familiar sight now tinged with dread. My house looked the same, blue shutters, an old pine tree shading the porch, but it felt different, like it no longer belonged to me. Inside, the living room was a mess, papers scattered, coffee stains on the kitchen floor, Jessica sitting stiffly on the couch while Tyler glared at the officers. Officer Daniels motioned me over. "Mr. Miller, can you confirm if these documents were signed by you?" I glanced at the pile of loan agreements and credit card statements. Every signature was a near-perfect copy of mine, but I knew, as surely as I knew my own heartbeat, that I hadn't signed a single one. "That's not my signature," I said, my voice steady for the first time all day. "None of this is mine. I don't gamble. I've never even been to Atlantic City." Tyler snorted. "He's just embarrassed. Old man's memory isn't what it used to be." The officer shot him a sharp look, then turned back to me. "We'll get a handwriting expert to confirm, sir. In the meantime, do you have any evidence of financial abuse or coercion?" That was when I pulled out the folder I'd packed in my rush. My will, property deed, proof of my finances, and most importantly, my medical records showing no cognitive impairment. The officers took careful photos, cataloging everything. Officer Daniels nodded approvingly. "We take elder abuse seriously in Colorado. We'll file for an order of protection if you'd like." The words felt foreign. Protection from my own daughter? But deep down, I knew it was the only way. Jessica finally looked up, her voice cracking. "Dad, I just wanted us to be safe. Tyler said we'd lose everything if we didn't act. I didn't want any of this." For a moment I saw the little girl she used to be, but only for a moment. The grown woman beside her had made choices, and now there would be consequences. I agreed to press charges for assault and fraud. The police told me I should find a lawyer, not just for criminal proceedings, but to make sure the house stayed in my name. Walt squeezed my shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, Stan." After the officers finished, Jessica and Tyler were told to leave the property. I stood in my own living room, the silence settling around me like fresh snow. My world had changed, but for the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't going to let them destroy everything I'd built. Tomorrow, I'd call a lawyer. Tonight, I'd sleep in my own bed, doors locked, mind clear, ready for the fight ahead. That first night back in my own house, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, letting its slow, steady whir fill the silence. The adrenaline of the day wore off, leaving nothing but exhaustion and the dull ache in my chest from the burns. But something else was settling in too: determination. I wasn't going to be the easy mark they planned on. I started the next morning with a notebook and a pen, making a list of everyone I could trust and everyone who'd watched Jessica and Tyler slowly push me into the background. I called my old friend Larry, who'd retired after 40 years as a family lawyer in Denver. He answered on the first ring, his voice just as sharp as it had been when we used to coach Little League together. "Stan, what happened?" Larry asked after I gave him the short version. "You need more than a restraining order. You need to lock down your finances and get ready for a fight." He drove over by lunchtime, bringing sandwiches and legal pads. We spread out all my paperwork across the kitchen table: property deed, insurance, the will, the folder of debt documents I'd managed to recover. Larry read each page, his brow furrowing deeper with every new detail. "They left a paper trail a mile wide," he said finally. "You're in a strong position. Elder abuse statutes are tough here, especially with physical assault. We'll file an emergency order to keep them out of the house and freeze any accounts you share." By the time he left, we mapped out the next steps. Larry would file a motion in county court first thing Monday. He told me to check my accounts online, not just checking and savings, but my credit cards, pension, everything. I found 3 new credit cards opened in my name, plus a strange wire transfer I didn't recognize. Tyler's handiwork, no doubt. Larry called his friend, a forensic accountant, who promised to trace every dollar. "Don't worry, Stan. We'll get it sorted." For the first time since all this started, I believed it. In the afternoon, the phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. For a second, I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. "Stanley Miller?" a man's voice asked. "This is Detective Brooks from the District Attorney's office. I'm calling about the complaint you filed yesterday." He listened as I explained everything again: the forged debt, the forged signatures, the physical attack. He asked careful questions about dates and details: who had access to my house, who'd handled my bills, whether I'd ever felt pressured or threatened before. His voice was steady, patient. "Mr. Miller, this isn't just a family dispute," he said finally. "This is a criminal matter. We're opening an investigation for fraud and elder abuse." After I hung up, I walked through every room in the house, noting what had changed in the last year. Tyler's boxes were gone. The police had ordered them to remove their things, but I still found little reminders of their presence: a pair of sneakers in the hall, a broken mug under the sink, a set of spare keys hidden in the laundry room. I tossed everything into a trash bag and set it on the porch. Good riddance. Late that night, Walt dropped by with a casserole and a bottle of bourbon. "You holding up?" he asked, settling into his usual spot by the window. "Better than I expected," I said, and meant it. We sat in silence for a while, watching the dusk settle over the pines. "You know," Walt said finally, "they picked the wrong old man to mess with." I smiled for the first time in days. "Maybe so." He leaned forward, serious now. "But Stan, you need to be careful. People get desperate when their schemes fall apart. Tyler especially. I never trusted that guy. I won't let my guard down, I promised. But I'm not living in fear either." We talked late into the night, making plans for what came next: changing my locks, installing a security camera, warning the neighbors. Walt offered to stop by every morning, just in case. I thanked him, grateful beyond words for a friend who never wavered. As he left, he handed me a small stack of envelopes. "These came by earlier. From the bank, the power company, and one from Jessica." Her handwriting was unmistakable. I hesitated, then opened it. The note was short, just a few lines. Dad, I didn't want things to end this way. Tyler said it was the only option. I hope someday you'll understand. Jess. I read it twice, feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness. She wasn't a child anymore. She'd made her choices. And now so had I. That night, as I locked every door and checked the windows, I realized something had changed inside me. I wasn't the helpless old man they'd expected. I was a father, and I was ready to fight for what was mine. The following week was a blur of legal documents, phone calls, and visits from people I hadn't seen in years. The news that Jessica and Tyler had been forced out of my house spread through the neighborhood faster than a summer storm. Some folks showed up with casseroles or pies. Others just wanted to check if I was all right. I appreciated every gesture, but I could see it in their eyes, a mixture of pity and curiosity. They wondered how a father could end up in a battle with his own daughter. Detective Brooks stopped by on Wednesday, this time with a young woman in a navy blazer, ADA Clara Jenkins from the district attorney's office. They sat at my kitchen table, spreading out copies of the forged documents alongside my real records. Clara's questions were sharp, focused. When did Jessica and Tyler start handling your bills? Did they ever pressure you for money before? Have you noticed missing checks or unexplained withdrawals? I answered honestly, recounting every odd moment, every unexplained purchase, every instance when Jessica insisted on helping with my paperwork. When I showed them the screenshots of new accounts and the mystery wire transfer, Clara's eyes narrowed. "We'll subpoena the banks," she said. "With this much documentation, the fraud case is very strong." She flipped to the assault photos, the angry red burns still visible on my chest. "Elder abuse, too. They won't talk their way out of this." By Thursday, Larry had filed the protection order. Jessica and Tyler were banned from my property and forbidden to contact me, even by mail. Larry's friend, the forensic accountant, came by to dig through my statements and computer. "You were targeted," he said, tapping a finger on the printouts. "They started slow, siphoning off a little here, a little there, testing how much you notice. Once Tyler got access to your social security number, he went for broke. He found gambling accounts in my name, online credit approvals, a phony insurance claim. All with signatures that looked like mine, but I knew, and now the experts confirmed, they were forgeries. That Friday, as a cold front rolled over the city, I sat in the back booth of the neighborhood diner with Walt and Larry. "What happens next?" I asked, sipping at my coffee, the taste no longer tainted by painful memories. Larry explained. "The DA's office will press criminal charges. They're building a case for both financial and physical abuse. Once it's filed, Jessica and Tyler could face jail time. At the same time, we'll pursue civil damages, get your money back, and make sure your house stays protected." Walt leaned in. "Are you ready for that, Stan? Going to court, maybe seeing your own daughter in handcuffs?" I hesitated, my chest tight. "No father is ever ready for that. But if I let this go, they'll just do it again, to me, or to someone else. I have to see it through." Larry nodded, respect in his eyes. "You're stronger than you know." That night, I sat in my living room, the house silent but safe for the first time in years. I made a new list, this one just for myself. Change all passwords. Call the locksmith for reinforced locks. Send letters to every bank and credit agency. Set up a meeting with my financial planner. Then I wrote a second list. Invite my granddaughter Lily and her family for dinner. Join the Friday breakfast club at the senior center again. Start on the garden beds I'd let go last spring. This ordeal had taken enough from me. I was done letting Jessica and Tyler rule my days with threats and manipulation. I'd lost a daughter to greed, but I wasn't going to lose myself too. On Sunday, after church, my pastor stopped me on the sidewalk. "Stan, if you need anything, legal, spiritual, just someone to talk to, you call me. I shook his hand and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Maybe it was time to open up, to let others help, instead of carrying everything alone. That evening, I found a small note taped to my mailbox in a hurried scrawl. Dad, I'm sorry. Tyler told me we had no choice. I wish I could go back. Please forgive me. I read it twice, my heart torn between anger and a parent's longing for peace. I folded it and put it away with the rest of the evidence. Forgiveness could wait. Right now, justice mattered more. Court day arrived on a cold March morning, the kind that makes your bones ache but your mind sharp. Larry picked me up early, both of us dressed in our best suits, files and folders stacked on the back seat. As we drove downtown through a blanket of fresh snow, I looked out at the city that had been my home for nearly 50 years, its wide streets, mountain skyline, the local coffee shop where I'd played chess with old friends. I'd always thought this was a place where things like this didn't happen. I was wrong. Inside the courthouse, the waiting room buzzed with nervous families, attorneys in hurried conversation, a bailiff reading off names like a roll call at school. Larry went to check in with the clerk while I sat alone, hands folded tightly in my lap. I saw Jessica and Tyler arrive together, their faces pale, eyes darting nervously. They didn't look at me. I felt a surge of sadness, but I kept my head high. When our case was called, we stepped into a modest courtroom, wood-paneled walls, the American flag in the corner. Judge Harper, a no-nonsense woman with sharp glasses and an air of quiet authority, listened as both lawyers made their opening remarks. Clara Jenkins, the assistant DA, laid it out plain. This is a case of elder abuse, financial fraud, and assault. The victim, Mr. Stanley Miller, was targeted by family members he trusted, who used deception and violence to try to steal his life savings and his home. Larry presented the documents, medical reports, and forensic analysis. The expert testified that the signatures on the debts and bank transfers were clear forgeries. Detective Brooks described how Tyler had opened online gambling accounts in my name, how Jessica had helped cover the tracks. When Jessica took the stand, her voice trembled. I didn't want to hurt my father. Tyler said we needed the money, that Dad would be fine. I lost control. Tyler was less remorseful. He tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, claiming I'd authorized the loans and forgotten. The judge wasn't buying it. You took advantage of a vulnerable senior, manipulated him, and when confronted, resorted to violence. By the end of the hearing, it was all there for the world to see. The greed, the betrayal, the lies. I felt exposed, but also strangely free. There was no going back to the way things were. The judge issued a restraining order, keeping both Jessica and Tyler away from me and my property. Tyler was remanded into custody on fraud charges, while Jessica was allowed to return home, pending sentencing, under strict supervision and counseling. After court, Larry clapped me on the back. You did it, Stan. Not everyone would have the strength. I thanked him, feeling the exhaustion settle into my bones. We walked out into the thin spring sunshine, snow still melting in puddles along the sidewalk. I stood for a moment, letting the light hit my face, breathing in the clean, cold air. That afternoon, my granddaughter Lily arrived with her husband and their 2 little boys. She hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. Grandpa, I'm so sorry for what they did. You didn't deserve any of it. Her boys, Jack and Ethan, darted into the living room, chasing each other and filling the house with laughter. I realized how long it had been since I'd heard that kind of joy in my home. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of the past year start to lift. Lily and I talked long after the boys went to bed. She told me about her own worries, how she'd watched Jessica change, grow distant and defensive. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. You're helping now, I said quietly. Just being here. Reminding me what family's supposed to be. As the evening wore on, I sat by the window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood. I knew things would never be the same, but I also knew I wasn't alone. Friends, honest family, even neighbors had rallied around me when I needed it most. My home, though scarred, was still standing, and so was I. The next morning, I started fresh. I tidied the house, cleaned out old files, planted the first seeds in the garden. Every day brought a little more healing, a little more peace. The legal battle wasn't over yet. Tyler still faced sentencing, and Jessica would need to pay restitution for what she'd done. But as I watched the sunrise over the Rockies, I felt hope stirring in me again. I'd survived betrayal, loss, and humiliation, but I'd also reclaimed my life. And as the days grew longer and the world warmed, I was ready to move forward, no longer as a victim, but as a survivor, a father, and a man who refused to be broken by anyone. A month passed, and slowly, the old rhythms of my life returned: morning walks, coffee with Walt at the diner, tending to the backyard where the first tulips poked through the thawed earth. Each day, the pain from my burns faded, replaced by a steadier calm, like the quiet after a long storm. The courthouse sent a letter with the official verdict. Tyler was sentenced to 4 years for fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse, with orders to pay restitution. Jessica received probation, community service, and was required to attend counseling and repay what she'd stolen, a monthly reminder that choices have consequences, even for those we love. Some nights I still woke in the dark, haunted by the look in Jessica's eyes when the judge handed down the sentence, not just fear, but the deep sorrow of a bridge burned. I missed the daughter I'd once known, the little girl who'd run barefoot across the yard, chasing fireflies and begging for one more story before bed. But the truth was clear: you cannot save someone who refuses to change. You can only save yourself, and hold out hope they'll find their way back someday. Friends and neighbors came by more often now, some bringing casseroles, others just company. Lily and her boys made my home come alive again, filling the rooms with laughter and the sound of running feet. "Grandpa," Jack said one afternoon, his hands muddy from helping me in the garden, "are you happy again?" I looked at his earnest face and felt something loosen inside me. "I think I am, kiddo. It just takes time." With the legal mess behind me, I started volunteering at the community center, helping other seniors learn how to protect themselves from scams and abuse. My story was a cautionary tale, but I told it without shame. If I could spare even one person what I'd been through, it was worth every uncomfortable truth. Walt and I took a road trip up into the Rockies one weekend, just 2 old friends, a thermos of coffee, and the bright sweep of mountain sky. We talked about everything and nothing: baseball, old memories, plans for the summer. At one overlook, Walt clapped me on the shoulder. "You know, Stan, not everyone would have fought back. Most people just give up." I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun and the freedom of the open road. "Well, I've never been good at quitting." The house, once a battleground, was finally peaceful. New locks, new routines, but also new traditions: Sunday dinners with Lily, game nights with neighbors, a book club that met once a month in my sunroom. I found myself looking forward instead of back. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit on the porch and watch the lights of the city below, thinking about all that had changed. The pain was real, but so was the healing. I'd learned that family can disappoint, even betray you, but it can also surprise you with its resilience and love. One evening, an envelope arrived. Jessica's handwriting, careful and unsure. Inside, a letter. "Dad, I know I can't fix what I did. I hope one day you'll find it in your heart to forgive me. I'm trying to change, for Lily, for myself. Thank you for loving me, even when I made it impossible." I didn't write back, not right away. Some wounds need time, some trust needs to be rebuilt inch by inch. But I left the porch light on, just in case she ever found her way home. As spring turned to summer, I realized I hadn't just survived what happened, I'd grown from it. My home was my own again, my dignity restored. The world outside kept turning, but I moved through it with a little more wisdom, a little less fear. And every morning, as the sun broke over the mountains, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, sat by the window, and said a quiet thanks, for freedom, for family, for the strength to start again.